So I just got off a really long live on TikTok, and so many topics were brought up, but I kind of went on like a stream of consciousness kind of thing, like I do. But um, and I think I probably will. This probably will still kind of continue into this whole emotional um, emotional sensitivity, emotional understanding, emotional regulation kind of part one and part two that I've done so far. I forgot what I called it, but just the emotional understanding overall and the things that can, affect us or whatever. So, one that I think I'll make this part three, but one that I think is really interesting is that we can start to see human nature through human behavior. What we kind of do when we believe there's no consequences. We won't get in trouble. There won't be consequences to our actions, right? Like, so there was some, I will have to look this up for specifics for if anybody wants me to, but apparently there was a bit of a like research poll or questionnaire that was given out. I don't know the exact group size, but it's more the findings were interesting. So apparently it was asked of a pretty decent group of men if you could, I don't know, if you could get with, I don't know, like children, or you could, force a woman to do something you wanted her or the child or whatever to do in a sexual manner, and there were no consequences. Or, you didn't get found out or whatever. Would you do it? A lot of them said yes. Now, I'm not just saying that this is just men, right? I think when it comes to the sexual side of things, we do see some pretty interesting things about men. And I'm not saying all men. There are plenty of men who don't fit into this, but again, there are a lot of males who do. Different ages too, different parts of the world. Again, this will all come down to, like if we're talking about some areas around the world, it's part of the culture. It's part of the conditioning. You're a man. Your decision is the be and end all. And, again, you're legally allowed to do this to children or to women or whatever. And again, there's no whatever your choices are, because you're a man, you're legally allowed to do it. So again, there is no consequences. It's completely seen as fine, in fact, like by your right. And so, of course, it wouldn't be seen wrong there, would it? By both men and women. But let's just face the fact, shall we? If it's up to one group of people to oppress another, to oppress another, this is still going to be a victimizer situation. And you can put this lens in a lot of ways. You can put this over animals that are, used as food. You can put this over children and women. It still is. Or even people of color. This still is a victimizer. Even if it's seen as legal, even if it's seen as it's okay, and there's no consequences from a legal or, societal standpoint. If there's a certain group who are being oppressed, their rights aren't being taken into account, that's a victim. And if there's another group who thinks it's okay to do that to the other group, this is a victimizer. Because at the end of the day, we have to think about the torture being involved to the party that doesn't want it. They didn't choose it. Who speaks up for them? So this just goes to show, and again, from an entitlement point of view, from an emotional regulation point of view, it doesn't matter what lens you put it in, it's wrong, isn't it? It's wrong. So from that point of view, it's also, there's a big thing around a lot of um, a lot of pedos, right, were abused as children. That's this is commonly known by a lot of people, but that's the truth. It causes a distortion. So you were forced, and this is usually how it goes for men, right? For men, if they're SA'd as boys, they either become the protector, or they decide, you know what, I want to look after the less vulnerable. I mean, the more vulnerable. I don't want to be part of that, so I choose not engage, right? That does happen. And then there's ones that are, again, it depends on how they react to it. That's the first sexual experience, so that can kind of cause some strange things to happen in the mind. That was their first experience, so sometimes that can be the thing that they're excited by. Plus, it's also, you got to take into account, sometimes that can cause you not to grow up, that part of you, right? Your innocence was taken from you. It wasn't your choice. You weren't ready. So again, that can also play a role in what you're excited by. That's what happens with pedos. A lot, like pretty much all the time. And that's a difficult thing, where do you slot that in? Where do you slot in that intervention? I suppose the first step is the acknowledgement that these things happen to little boys. And then getting them some kind of help or therapy, or I don't have all the answers, but, open that dialogue, make it safe to discuss. And then we create a different outcome, potentially. For young girls, it can either go into she completely denies, right, the engagement of sex with anyone, with any partner. She's complete. I'm not doing that. I don't want anything to do with it. And she closes up because it's too scary. It's too triggering. Because it happened before she wanted it to. And now she's closed off. Now the other one is becoming promiscuous. So this idea about women being promiscuous and being, all these other derogatory terms. The other thing that this can lead into is things like adult work, stripping, adult content, OnlyFans, porn. Again, I don't know if I'm allowed to say that here, but whatever. So again, that's where things can get interesting. Pretty much every single woman who partakes in adult content, it isn't because they like it. It isn't because they enjoy it. It's because they were SA'd as little girls. And then, of course, it makes you wonder, since so many males watch this stuff. Again, I think that there's some where, maybe they don't have access and it's been so normalized. That's the only way they can kind of deal with these urges or desires or whatever. So, they watch. I'm sure there's some that they can't, connect in a normal way, I guess, with women. So they watch these things. I think religion and patriarchy has a lot to play into this as well, because again, in religion, it's seen as, sexual desire is seen as something evil, wrong, sinful, and that's how we all got here, right? So again, if you're seen as something that's part of a normal part of biology, of what makes up a human being, if that's seen as evil or wrong, then you're going to try and suppress it. You're going to feel shame over it. Those feelings don't go away. They don't just vanish. You don't just go one day and go, I guess I don't have any desires anymore. It doesn't work like that. So you end up kind of, it sort of creates, again, another split, another distortion, sits into your shadow. Again, if we start to put other things involved, so not even just SA, this can be abuse of any kind. If you grow up with an abusive parent, you're probably going to have some issues from not just your personality, but also like what you get excited by. It could be that you use porn and things like this as an escape. as a way to escape your circumstances and your environment. And then, like any addiction, any self-destructive addiction, now you've trained your brain, and you can't stop the cycle. It's created pathways. You can stop it. You just have to work hard. And there are people, again, a lot of times males, they don't know how to stop it. It started when they were 8, 9, 10 years old, and now they're 20, 30, 40, 50, and they're still doing these things. So we have to start to ask the question, what exactly is it? What happens to little boys when they change from boys to men? What happens to them? Is this a supported, guided thing? Are they left alone too much? Are they not taught or taught about how they need to connect? Is there too much shame pushed in then, and too many expectations? Because I think personally, based on what I know of a lot of males, they have too much responsibility put on them, more than what they're capable of. And I don't mean that in a rude way. I'm actually being serious. And so if that's the situation, and you're put into a situation where you're bound to fail because it's way beyond what you can handle on your own, you're going to fail, aren't you? You're going to feel not good enough. You're going to feel like you've got nothing to offer, like you have no purpose. And these are the things you hear men say. So they're looking for escapes. They're looking for ways to connect. They're looking for ways for fulfillment. And again, a lot of it has to do with that. So it makes sense why they get addicted to porn. Because it's something that they need, I guess. And then they're going to get it however they can get it, and it's available. But people don't take into account what it does. What the problem is going further. And I think that's what it comes down to, is each of us, human beings, we have to figure out what our personal issues are. Again, if you don't know how to do that, you can, that's why I do the stuff I do, so I can help people. But you have to figure out what your issues are, what your need, what your needs are, and then, facing that, finding a way to be comfortable with that, so that you can go further and then live the life you want to live, get the outcomes you want to get. And I think men need a lot more emotional support, a lot more help to understand how their brain works from a young age. And I think the same with women. Women also need to be helped with how their brain works as little girls, so they can grow up into healthy women, healthy adults. Same thing needs to be done for boys. But it's different. The female brain is different than the male brain. So we have to work out what are the needs and requirements, emotionally, mentally, physically, whatever, for each individual person. And that can be difficult because, again, we're talking about an entire civilization of people. How do we work that out on an individual level? And that's unfortunately what we often do, is we put like, this is how all men are, and this is how all women are. And that's just not true. We're each individuals. We each have our own emotional, mental, physical faculties. How does that show up for us as individuals? How do we work with that? And how do we get the best out of it? It takes work. It takes internal work, looking inside, figuring these things out. And then support. I think a big thing that can cause issues is, again, blaming other people, using shame tactics, judgments, like these kinds of things to corner and shoehorn ourselves into things, for us to sort of think no matter what we do, it's never good enough. These kinds of things, And so it's worth, and that's what I mean, we have to kind of think about who we are as individuals and how we regulate our emotions, what we do with that, where we go further. And then from there, we can make some changes, I suppose. Some interesting points, I think, interesting questions. It brings up interesting topics. And I know I do talk a lot about males. But again, we've lived in a society where it's been very male dominated. So I think that's where we have to look first to figure out what we've done so we can figure out what we can do going forward. Anyway, I think I'll leave it there, and I'll do more parts of this. I mean, I don't even know if it's fully exactly the same series, but or what I'll even call this one. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what it's labeled, does it? It's more about the content. It's more about what's being said. So I hope that was interesting.